I will therefore hand the floor to Marlys.
Great, thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Nice to see you. I'm just going to share my slides. Are you able to see them?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, hello. This is, I think, the third time that I've presented at EURAM to talk about Academy of Management Discoveries. I'm Marilyn Christensen. I'm from the Rotman School of Management. I've been an editor at AMD since 2017 under Peter Bamberger and now under Kevin Rotman. And I'm really excited about the journal. That's why I've spent so much time with it. Here's our current editorial team. Kevin Rotman is the editor-in-chief. We have a number of really fantastic editors. Some of us wear different kinds of hats. Eric Dane leads in Discoveries in Brief, which I'll talk about in a bit. We have a number of special issues or special themes, which some of the editors are involved with. We had an Errors in Organization special issue, which is going to come out in a bit. I've been part of that. But the other thing I do at AMD is multimedia, which is something that's special about the journal. So here's who we are, and let me tell you a little bit about AMD. So as you may know, AMD is the newest of the Academy of Management journals. I think we first started publishing in 2015. And the reason the journal was founded is there was a lot of conversations in the field. You'll see here, people were talking more about abductive reasoning, the need to focus on phenomenon, this notion of pre-theory where we see interesting things in the world, but we don't yet have sort of a theoretical frameworks to explain them. And there was also a lot of discussions about perhaps we focus on theory too much. We fetishize it to the sort of detriment of actually focusing on phenomenon. So that's some of the reasons that led to AMD, which is meant to be a journal for empirical exploration. And during my time at AMD, we've described it variously. We spent a lot of time talking about abduction and abductive reasoning. Kevin Rotman, our current editor-in-chief, talks more about phenomenon-forward research, and I'll talk about that in a second. So Academy of Management Discovery is this journal for empirical exploration. The idea is that you have compelling, interesting phenomenon that existing theory cannot adequately explain. We do not publish deductive or hypothesis testing research. And often we publish research that people haven't been able to find other homes for because they have this really cool finding, but they keep getting the critique that they just don't have sort of a theoretical frame to understand it. And so we're interested in work that's a little earlier on where people are still trying to figure out what's going on. The great thing about not necessarily testing hypotheses is that it allows people to talk about phenomenon in a more emergent way, and there's no need to reverse engineer. So in many journals, things like harking is a concern. In our journal, we want people to sort of dig into the data, but also to explain what it is that they are doing. So we publish both quantitative and qualitative research. And the idea is that you represent the phenomenon and you end up building theory from the phenomenon, but you don't necessarily need to have a theoretical lens going in. So this is the way that Kevin Rotman really likes to talk about AMD, this phenomenon forward journal. The idea is that the papers look a little different. The front end is mostly about what the phenomenon is, and then it's at the end of the paper where people build theory and contribute to the theoretical conversation. This is a long slide. I'm not going to read it all. The main thing to say is we accept all methodologies. We actually publish a lot of qualitative research, but we're open to many other kinds of research, and including things like replications or meta-analyses. The one thing I would note, which sometimes is surprising to authors, is that the empirical bar at AMD is quite high. And the reason for this is that people don't have sort of a well-established theoretical framework that they're drawing on. So we really need the authors to be able to demonstrate that what they're finding is robust and not just sort of a spurious finding or something that's very idiosyncratic. So there's quite a high empirical bar for doing research. We welcome registered reports. I don't think we've gotten one yet, but we would love to have one if you do research where you have registered reports where you would sort of talk about what you planned ahead of time. It's a little, since AMD doesn't test hypotheses, this would be for people where sort of non-findings would be particularly compelling or challenging. For analyses, the idea is that you come up with your, that you try and come up with the sort of most succinct explanation for what's going on. It's not that you're making a very strong knowledge claim in terms of certainty. These are first suggestions or your sense of what's happening, but you do need to be quite comprehensive and coherent in the way that you approach and unpack your data, and look for patterns and suggestions of, you know, if we take your findings seriously, what might this suggest for future research? This is what you discuss at the end of the paper, and you're really trying to unpack the implications for down the road theorizing. Sort of what are the defining elements of the context of the model that you're developing? How would people's research be changed if we took your findings seriously? So we've got a couple of innovative features. I want to talk about a couple of them. One of them is discoveries in brief, and this is actually something that Kevin Rotman and his team, particularly Eric Dane, have really taken up and changed a bit from the way it was previously. They are really focused on sort of writing and engaging audiences in a different way. So this is a much more, it's not a typical academic way of writing articles. And we've got information on the website if you're curious about it. I'm happy to answer questions later. But the idea is that it's much more like a popular, like a New Yorker article rather than something we would see in an academic journal. And they're short, they're fewer than 20 pages. And they're being managed, I think, by Eric and Kevin right now. And the idea is to just bring different styles of writing to the field. One of the other innovations we do are multimedia enhancements, and this is something that I lead at AMD. If you've read an AMD article, you'll see that all of them have these animated whiteboards. So each of them has this short video at the beginning that explains sort of the key issue involved in the article. This is something we provide for authors of the journal. This is not something that they incur a cost for. We also try and really feature the author's voice in the writing, but we also have this feature where there's a number of questions that people can speak to. Things like what motivated them to conduct the research, the most interesting or challenging parts of it. We have all papers now speak to the social relevance of their paper. That's our journal's commitment to the Responsible Research in Business and Management initiative. We're now doing interactive data visualizations. We've done, I think, 4 of them. And we've just pioneered a new innovation called practitioner commentaries, where we have the authors in conversation with someone from the world of practice. And those are, the previous one was an audio recording. This one, next one that we're currently working on may even be a video with the authors and the practitioner. So they're just different ways of connecting the research. So why should you consider publishing in AMD? So if you have compelling findings that existing theory really doesn't fully explain, that would be a great start. If you want to find sort of new creative ways, whether that's the way you write or the way that you engage with multimedia, we're an online only journal, so we can do a lot of different things. For qualitative research, we embed, for instance, video or photos. For experiments, for some experiments, we've published their whole experimental protocol, including prompts. There's just a lot of ways you can be creative in the way you present your research. And the most critical thing is that you're just very upfront, whether you're doing qualitative or quantitative data, with how you've explored your data and how you've conducted your analyses. There's lots of ways to learn more about AMD besides what I'm sharing today. I wanted to mention there was a recent FTE that came out about publishing in AOM journals. It's all the editors from all the AOM journals wrote this. It's published in AMD in March 2021, but it compares things like AMD versus AMJ or AMR versus Annals. We have many calls for submissions that are currently on the go, discoveries in brief, as I mentioned, and then there's a special issue on I think someone's microphone is on, health, well-being, and work in the age of pandemic. And then there's this is a special theme that Tim Hoff is working on. And then there's a future of work special issue. The call is out now, but submissions are not until until May of 2022. And at Academy of Management, which will be virtual, of course, this year, there'll be a Meet the Editor session for all the different Academy journals. And here's the information about that. So that's the end of my my short intro to AMD. Thank you so much. I'm not sure what the format of the session is. I'm guessing we'll have a number of presentations and then a Q&A, but I'll leave that up to the leader of our group to decide. So that's it for me. I'm going to stop sharing my slide. Thanks so much for listening to what we do at AMD.
Thank you very much, Marlys, for this very exciting presentation. You can begin to ask questions through the chat, of course, and I will give the floor to Shlomo.
Thank you. Just a second, please. Okay. Hello, everyone. I hope you can see my presentation and can hear me.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks again for inviting me. My name is Professor Shlomo Tarba. I'm a chair in International Business and Strategy in the University of Birmingham. And since January this year, I started my term as a co-editor-in-chief.
Please mute your.
Yes, there's some background noise.
Sorry for
Thank
that.
you. Since January, I started my term as a co-editor-in-chief of British Journal of Management, having served previously last year as a deputy editor-in-chief. British Journal of Management is the official outlet of British Academy of Management. We have 2 co-editors-in-chief, 13 associate editors, more than 100 members of editorial board, and it is quite diversified, as you can see, from 27 countries. We are publishing 4 issues a year, and we are ranked as a 4-star journal according to the ABS journal guide, and in Australian ABDC ranking, we are ranked as an A journal. My co-editor is Professor Douglas Cumming. He's a leading scholar and a professor of finance and entrepreneurship in Florida Atlantic University. Our editorial team, the associate editors, are from various countries, and they are leading experts in various domains, as you can see, in organizational behavior, finance, marketing, international business. And we have also the communications editor, associate editor who deals with communication, Professor George Freinas. British Journal of Management provides a vital outlet for scholarship on various topics, management-oriented topics. We are considering articles of multidisciplinary nature from various realms, from entrepreneurship, finance, IB, organizational behavior, strategy, And we are receiving contributions from all over the world. Therefore, I would say we are a generalist journal. And we particularly like the articles of multidisciplinary nature. A few figures in terms of submissions. Last year, for example, we received around 720 articles. The acceptance rate and desk reject rate, they can vary, to tell the truth, from year to year. And the current geographical distribution of submissions, as you can see, most of submissions are from Europe. We're also getting 30% from Asia, from North America, from Australia, Africa, but some of the regions are unfortunately underrepresented. And we are trying, of course, to boost the visibility of the journal in those regions. What types of contributions we are looking for? We are looking for original papers that advance theory. However, I would like to emphasize that we are looking for empirical papers, and sometimes we are ready to consider the conceptual papers. However, we are not publishing, we are not considering review papers. Why? Because obviously we don't want to compete with our sister journal, with IJMR, International Journal of Management Reviews, because they are publishing review papers and also meta-analytic studies occasionally. We have, sometimes we're accommodating special issues. For example, recently we published a special issue on collaborative partnerships, namely alliances, joint ventures, and so forth. Also, we just finalized a special issue on the employee voice. And currently we are at the final stages of a special issue on COVID-19. It is a very interesting topic, and the papers that are accepted in that special issue will provide insights on how organizations and employees in various settings are developing their resilience while coping with this unprecedented challenge, COVID-19 namely. We also have the methodology corner, and I would welcome everyone to visit our methodology corner in order to see what type of papers we are considering publishing in this particular rubric. Theory, conceptual papers. We are open to consider any novel contribution that advance any area in business and management. And for reference to prior work on the topic, I would advise to visit our website and have a look. Empirical papers. In the empirical papers part, we are open to contributions that are using either secondary or primary or a combination of both types of data. However, it is very important to remember that even if you have some interesting findings, but not solid theoretical conceptual contribution, it's not enough. Therefore, bringing about novelty, added value versus existing knowledge in the particular domain is of crucial importance in order to overcome the desk reject stage, because we are looking, first of all, for a very strong conceptual contribution. I would like to provide an example. Originally, I'm coming myself from the international business and strategy area, and IB and corporate strategy realms have been predominated for decades by research studies that utilized, first of all, secondary data. However, today, if you want to make a strong contribution, you need to go to the micro-foundational level. You cannot stay no longer at the aggregate level. And in order to explore truly the team level, individual level, the structural components of the organizational phenomena, you need to get access to the primary data. And this is a very serious challenge, obviously, that we are aware. Methodology corner papers. The main criterion here is the paper presents a new contribution to our current understanding of methodological challenges. For example, we have a paper on using the case studies in order to build solid theory. We have a different study on using visual methods for qualitative network research and so on. Special issues, part of them I already mentioned. We have also open calls for paper, for example, on reshoring and sustainable development goals, on advancing research methodology in management scholarships. The special issues are posted online, so I would advise, of course, to visit and read the full call for papers in order to understand if your particular work fits this special issue calls or not. Very briefly, this is a very complex figure, I'm aware, but it represents actually the different stages in the workflow of the journal. First of all, any submission comes to one of co-editors. It is assigned to one of co-editors, and we have the right to decide whether we are proceeding with a particular paper, or if it doesn't fit the journal. For example, still we are getting many systematic review papers, surprisingly, despite clearly stating in the website of our journal that we are not considering any review papers, still many authors are submitting them. So if the paper doesn't meet the criteria, doesn't meet the standards of the journal, we have the right to desk reject. If we decide to proceed with a particular paper, it is assigned to one of our associate editors, and the associate editors also have the right to desk reject the paper if they still believe that it doesn't fit the journal. If eventually the associate editor decides to proceed further, he or she are inviting reviewers. We are inviting 3 reviewers in general. And later on, depending on the outcome, the authors can receive an invitation to revise and resubmit, or sometimes the paper, of course, might be rejected. So this is very briefly about the journal. And of course, I would welcome any questions later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shlomo. Michael, I give you the floor for the European Management Review. Michael?
Yeah, I'm just seeing, Hervé, if I can share my screen with you.
Okay, thank you.
No. Can you see that, folks?
Yeah, it's okay.
Great, thank you very much indeed, and thank you all for joining us this morning. I'm going to take a few moments to talk about EURAM's journal, European Management Review, and as with our other editors here this morning, we'll happily take some questions and answers for the session afterwards. So my name is Michael Morley, and I'm based at the University of Limerick here in Ireland. For a number of years, I served as a co-editor of European Management Review under the editorship of Johannes Altmann. And for the past year, I've had the pleasure of serving as editor-in-chief. And from February onwards of next year, the incoming editor-in-chief will be Professor Anna Granduri from Bocconi University. I'm not sure if Anna's in the audience this morning. She may be. I know that I'll be mentioning her later again. She's got a special issue of European Management Review, which we'll be doing a session on later today. I can also say, of course, as with the other journals, this is very much a team effort. We've got a number of editors and we've got a number of associate editors. This is the current editor team. Professor Vlad Weiman from California Lutheran University, who's a HR and a talent management specialist. Desislava Dekova from Vienna University of Economics Business Administration, who's an international business specialist. We've got Professor Bill Lee, and Bill performs two particular roles for the journal. He looks after accounting and finance papers that we get, and he's also looking after our methodology matters section, something which I'll be talking about in a few moments. We've got Pascal Masson, who is, of course, an innovation scholar. And finally, we've got Nada Korakagabadze, who's at Henley Business School. Nada specializes in particular in corporate governance. And in addition to these colleagues, then, of course, we've got an associate editor team. And once again, this is very much designed to try and capture the kind of scholarship that the journal receives and to try and ensure it can be handled by appropriate editors depending upon the domain area in which scholars are submitting. In addition, we've got a very large editorial board, more than 100 members from over 25 countries. So again, it's very heterogeneous and it's very culturally distributed. And that's important because of, again, A, the kind of scholarship that we get, and B, of course, because of the particular focus that European Management Review has as a general management journal, and also as a journal that is particularly interested in context and contextualization and how it is that matters for the kind of knowledge that we produce. We're 4 issues per year, and we're now also totally online. And so the move to online only is important because it means that we can be slightly more flexible, of course, about the contribution to length ratio of a manuscript. And it also means that we can, of course, incorporate online appendices, and we can do online data sharing as part of the publication process. In 2020, articles were downloaded about 135,000 times. And that means that the reach of European Management Review as a journal, of course, has been growing year on year. In terms of its presence, it's available in about 10,000 institutions. The impact factor at the moment is 1.533, and we've got a number of recognition schemes which we promote annually. And the good news is they will be coming up at the EURAM ceremony tomorrow, where we'll be announcing our best paper for 2020. But in addition, we obviously like to promote the most cited papers, the most downloaded papers, and most importantly of all, in relation to recognition, we really want to try and recognize our reviewers. In the most recent editorial I wrote, I focused on the idea of the reach and the ripple of the impactful review and reviewer. This is fundamentally important to any of our journals. Our reviewers do this on a voluntary basis. And when we find those effective, impactful reviewers, naturally, of course, we want to celebrate those. In terms of aims and scope, so our aims are really about advancing the understanding of management in a range of domain areas. So we take work on private sector, on public sector, on voluntary organizations, and we also, of course, take both empirical and theoretical analysis. It's important to say that because when you've got the word review in your title, on occasion, people can mistake that to mean that it's only a review or a conceptual journal. Quite the opposite. We use the word review in the European tradition, but we focus on scholarship that is both empirical and theoretical. And we really want to try and foster high quality research among our community, which is largely European scholars, but not exclusively. It is an increasingly, of course, global community. But we do have a European perspective, if you like. And so what we suggest is that our heritage is European, our context is European, but of course, we speak to a global audience. So you will often find that there are certain European leitmotifs in the journal, but there is also a global scholarship because many of the issues and debates that go on in the journal are, of course, rather universal. And we also cover a broad range of topics. So from human resource management and OB at the more micro level to strategy and innovation at the more meso level, and right through, of course, to the macro level, where we do quite a bit of work on context issues and how context influences policy and practice development. And there was a recent bibliometric done on the first 15 years of the journal. And what it demonstrated was that the scholarship to date in the journal was focused on 4 particular clusters. There was a range of scholarship in innovation, a range of scholarship on strategic management, followed by corporate governance, and finally in human resource management. Since its inception, the journal has really tried to have a breadth of scholarship and to really embrace a diversity of perspectives and approaches. And that's important, again, against the backdrop of what I said about, European leitmotifs in the scholarship generally. We want to ensure as diverse representation of scholarship, quantitatively, qualitatively, mixed methods. And again, if you leaf through previous issues of the journal, you will very much see that kind of mix of scholarship represented. We also have a Methodology Matters section, and that's the section that is looked after by Bill Lee. And I have to say, it's a very exciting part of the journal, and it's a very exciting development in the journal. And we get a range of really interesting papers on aspects of method which make it through the system. I just cite 2 particular recent examples that I found to be extremely interesting debates within the methodological sphere. So there's a forthcoming paper in issue 2, which will be published in about a month's time, on bridging research practice tensions from an engaged scholar's perspective. And it is a really interesting treatise on what we know is an ongoing debate within management and business schools. And in issue 1, we published an extremely interesting paper on contextual expertise and the development of management theory. And I was very excited about this paper because, in a sense, it very much speaks to many of the debates that have happened in European management review around the premise and the prominence of context as an important part of the story of management research and scholarship. In terms of publishing in the journal, I had a couple of observations based on my own experience, particularly over the last year, but also the number of years previous. And I wanted to spend just 2 or 3 minutes on this. The first thing I would say is, try and really connect with the journal not just in terms of aims and scope and so on, but also debates happening within the community in the journal. I think this is really important. You know, we get a lot of scholarship that we have to reject because it simply doesn't fit. And because it doesn't fit, it's obviously related to the issue of aims and scope. But what really matters here is A, that it fits, and B, in as much as it can, that it connects with debates that are happening in the journal. Secondly, I would say it's really important to understand the contours of the ongoing conversation in the domain area. We want work that is properly situated within the territory that it wants to push forward. And that really means being clear about where the work connects with the conversation that has happened heretofore, as the wonderful Anne Huff says, and tries to be clear about where it is it's pushing that conversation forward. The title matters. The clarity of the abstract. These are elements of what I call the route map for the reader through the piece that the scholar wants to publish. So these linchpins, these touchstones of the title, the abstract, the compelling introduction, good problem methodological fit. This is a critically important part of why some manuscripts don't make it through the system. The nature of the analytical technique and how it is explained, the way the evidence is presented, and of course, ultimately, how it is that evidence is reintegrated into an unfolding discussion about the particular domain area. So all of these, I think, are important touchstones for ensuring that papers get through the system. And finally, I would say, create your own review process in advance. Don't let the journal be the first place for the scholarship to be seen. It's often self-evident when it has happened elsewhere. I often say, where it's possible, sit in your reader's chair. This can be a very comfortable place to sit or sometimes very uncomfortable. And it's very interesting to see how work gets retrospectively read by scholars that originally the authors didn't intend. And I think that's about sitting in the reader's chair in as much as you can. And finally, a cover letter does matter in my view. A cover letter matters. It sends a signal to an editor about where a position, where a piece of scholarship is positioned, who can be appropriate reviewers, who can be part of that review team, etc. So these are the basic touchstones that I think really help pieces to get through the review process and to make it through to publication. In terms of what scholars like reading in European Management Review, I thought this was worth mentioning. These are the top 5 papers from 2020, and they speak again to the kind of diversity of scholarship and the different levels of scholarship that the readership of European Management Review pick up on. So a paper on gender quotas in corporate boards, a paper on the impact of the global economic crisis, a paper on performance appraisal and quality management, a paper on the role of management consultants, and finally on learning and absorptive capacity. What this demonstrates to me is, again, the readership embraces the diversity of topics and scholarship that the journal tries to publish. We also do special issues. We have 3 very exciting special issues forthcoming, or special sections, depending upon the number of papers that come through, that make it through the review process for the particular theme. So we've got a special section forthcoming on practices of organizing migrants' integration into the labour market. I feel very strong about this particular topic. I think it's a topic that that business and international business in particular probably hasn't picked up as much as it might. And I'm very excited about some of the scholarship that's coming through for that special section. We also have a special section on strategic improvisation. Shlomo actually is one of our guest editors for that. And finally, we've got a special section forthcoming also on the creative industries. And that will be published in 2021 as part of a special section. We've also got a current open call, which Anna Ganduri will be running a session for just after this meeting of editors. And that's a special issue on expanding the boundaries of rationality and the timeliness of the topic, of course, won't be lost on anybody. More about that when Anna speaks in the next session. Finally, you submit manuscripts through Scholar One. Our acceptance rate at the moment is about 14%, and the geography of submissions is becoming more heterogeneous. So historically, more scholarship from the United Kingdom, from France, but increasingly, as I said, the scholarship is coming from a broader range of territories. Finally, I wanted to mention that increasingly it's possible also to publish open access in the journal, because our publishers have a number of agreements in place now, a number of national level agreements, meaning that the corresponding author, if she or he is from a particular country or territory in which there is such an open access agreement, then of course the scholarship gets published open access. You will find us here, that's the website, and you will find the paper submission process behind Manuscript Central. Thanks very much indeed, and I'm happy to take any questions as part of our conversation later.
Thank you very much, Michael. I give the floor to Daniel for organization studies.
Thank you. So I share my screen.
I just stopped sharing, Daniel, so it should be possible now.
Yeah. Did that work? Can you see the screen?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for having me here and join the session at EURAM. I'm Daniel Hjorth, one of the editors-in-chief for organization studies since 2017 in my case. Renate Meyer is the other one. We have a 4-year term. I am outgoing, so to speak, September this year, and we have a 2-year overlap. So Paolo Catrone is joining, stepping into my shoes come September. Sofia Zagaraki is managing editor for the journal, so you will, if you submit, also have to deal with her gentle and caring hands. So many of you might know organization studies. It's a large journal in the sense we receive more than 950 submissions per year, and we publish 12 issues. We do that as a journal together with the European Group for Organizational Studies, EGOS. Our conference is coming up in a few weeks, Amsterdam this year, but of course fully virtual. So, but the local organizers are in Amsterdam. We are. This is a journal that we typically say that we do sort of care for the quirkiness of scholarly work in the field of organizational research. So curiosity is important for us, critical work too, of course. Bold research, as you find in the aims and scope there, it's too small to read almost, but I've picked out sort of a summary here of the aims and scope for the journal. Naturally focus on understanding organizations, organizing and the organized in and between society. So we also describe ourselves as a global outreach journal, broadly rooted in the social sciences, emphasizing diversity, comparative and open to paradigmatic plurality. So it's in today, you could say, a multidisciplinary research journal in many ways, and with particular emphasis on broad social science and also humanities conversations in pieces published. Sapperaude, we do stress daring to know, so I guess there are connections there to AUM discoveries in this sense of exploring, and This is reflected also in the kind or types of articles that the journal publishes. I will come to that in a few minutes. We are also interested in how organizations are created, and this is developed a bit in the editorial I wrote with Trish Ray when I started. So in that sense, we believe we expand into entrepreneurship as an organization creation process. And the criticality I talked about is very much resonant with the good old Immanuel Kant's statement, but revitalized perhaps primarily by Foucault in this emphasis on the importance of knowing your knowledge, to learn to know your knowledge. And this, of course, spills over in what we require from a paper in the journal. I will not talk too much about how to publish in the journal, so to speak, but place emphasis on the nature of the journal. But it's important, of course, to argue rather than just state, and to reason rather than just describe, and to be careful in motivating one's research and position it in a conversation that you don't need to agree with, of course, but you need to be aware of, and convince the reader that you're aware of conversations you are related to, and be careful about positioning where you are in that respect in order to secure a contribution to organization theory. 12 issues per year, 3 issues are special issues, so it's a big bunch of those in process at any point in time. I will describe those, the recent ones and the coming ones for you in a while. One of those is based on, one of the special issues is based on the journal's summer workshop. So we always have a organization studies summer workshop in May, historically always on a Greek island, and it gathers some 200 people, so it's a sort of a family-sized workshop, we typically say. There's a core group that typically return, and although the journal is 42 years old now, it had a 40-year anniversary in 2019. The workshop is in its 16th year, I think, so, but still a quite large community. Qualitative predominantly, but open to all. But if we look into what is published, you would say it's close to 80% qualitative research is published in the journal. And that is, to some, perhaps an evidence of the European tradition, where there is an emphasis, stronger emphasis on understanding phenomena via empirical research that is in the ethnographic tradition or anthropological tradition for many. 3 reviews and blind reviews per paper, and the stats are in production. So I'd say we typically receive them about now, and they are prepared for EGOS, our sort of big event in July. So these are the previous year's stats, but typically there's not much, or at least too much, surprise in the movement of those numbers. 4 types of articles. So empirical or conceptual research articles, fairly generous in length, 11,000 words maximum. And then we have our essay style papers. That is also a fairly long tradition in the journal. They're called X and OS, meaning it should be a topic like color and organization studies. We've had construction cranes and organization studies, animals and organization studies, to take some of those that might be a bit more experimental to some. Shorter, a bit more wittier, a bit more provocative in many cases, more personal perhaps, attentive to style, where we connect with what we find to be an important and a long tradition in scholarly work to write in essay form. Also methodology articles of the same length. This is a fairly new, reopened type of article for the journal. So just a couple of years in process, and we look forward to that. But we had a sense of that questions of methods and methodology had fallen a bit into oblivion after sort of method wars in the 70s and 80s, and what that spilled over into the 90s, but then sort of went away a bit. But now, following digitalization and video and so on, and online opportunities, we find there's an acute need to think about these questions again. Perspectives is a mostly, almost always commissioned type of article. So it's someone is asked to conclude to where a particular field has moved. So it does that by looking into a handful of previously published paper in the journal, bundles that into a virtual special issue, but the perspectives piece is then published in the journal. And that sort of is a way to climb a hill and say, what can we see from the top of this hill going forward? So it has a bit more of reviewing work, but also be responsible for providing a vision for what needs to be done to move ahead. Our process is very similar to what Shlomo described for their journal. Sophia is the gatekeeper, so to speak, or the one that receives and handles and administers the process. We have 2 editors-in-chief, as I said, and 30 to 35 senior editors, so quite large group of those that, of course, are invited on the basis of how they have performed as reviewers and on the basis of their expertise. So the journal can cover a broad set of themes and topics. An editorial review board with 175 or so members and a very large reviewer database. We're also on Scholar One, of course. Happy to receive more people that want to review for us. So 950 submissions last year. Not too much change in terms of how COVID had impacted. If we look into all the numbers, maybe a bit more than usual, but we have had more than 950 submissions in earlier years too, so it's a bit there perhaps. Desk rejection rate shows that a lot is falling perhaps out in the review process too. We publish between 6 to 7% of what is submitted to the journal, and that 6 to 7% seems to be a fairly stable amount if we look into larger volume journals. So special issues in production, food, organizing matters, organizational control and surveillance, power and performativity, organizing for social and institutional change, organizational and institutional entrepreneuring. These are in process, technology and organization, and those are a bit still not having finalized. The reviewing process include open organizing and open society, boosting urban sustainability through organizing collaborative ecosystem for smart city development. That's includes a tongue-wrecking title, and organizing sustainably. So as you see from that, and that's the purpose with showing that long list, is a quite broad and a set of topics that place emphasis on a journal that wants to be also in contact with society. So we do stress that in and between society. So not sort of ad hoc research, but research that is resonant, contextualized, and hopefully has something to say about where the world is going, so to speak. There is a long tradition in the journal for one of the conversations that we consider central being philosophy, and an upcoming call for papers that is about that. There is also, Harry Tukas has also initiated a workshop on philosophy and organizational studies. So there was a microphone on. But apart from that, collective action in crisis and dialogic organizing, both of those perhaps resonate with the topics of economic crisis and maybe also COVID, the challenge of finding communities again, or collective agency in various forms, now that we have been forced to sort of individualize work to a large extent. We just shift book editor team, and when we do that, we also shift over to what we call book and media review editor team. So these folks, Hokyo Wang, Erika Kosler, and Hamid Forogi, will be heading up that from the autumn. And it means that not only books, although we do love books at Organization Studies and we always review books and publish book reviews, we also now have a team that will look into a broader set, such as movies, even series on various platforms that might have caught interest and are important for various reasons, will then be subject to reviews and published in the journal. So we're looking forward to that. The website, this is a bleak version, but just a list of what appears on part of the website, where you find in particular guidelines for special issue proposals, should you have such in mind. We also have an editor's collection series. The virtual special issue I mentioned are related to the perspectives pieces. All the X and organization studies essays are collected there. The journal also has a Roland Calori Award. This is appointed via the EGOS conference and separate committees there, but it belongs, it's a prize that the journal awards. So stress a bit as I finish here on the X and OS. We have, if you want to get a sense of what these kinds of articles are about, there is a 10th issue, X, volume 14, 2019, where we gathered 10 X and OS essays. So it's an issue devoted to those, and you should get a sense of the style and variation that occurs in those. So this is from the journal's summer workshop last year. And this year we cancelled. We did not find a capacity actually in terms of technology and broadband and so on, where we usually work in Greece to make this possible. So we postponed. It will happen 22 instead. With this team, then I was invited to join a special issue editorial team, so I will be part of that. Happy to receive any questions about that. And the dates, you find this call, of course, also on the journal's website. And final slide says that we also opened our YouTube channel. I was impressed by EURAM discoveries. There is digital tools, and we are moving in a similar direction. Of course, authors have always the possibility of recording a pitch video. We have a template for how to do that. So on the website, you can make readers more curious about what you have done. That's one way to sit down in the reader's chair, as Michael talked about. This is very fresh, as you can see, that we have not or maybe launched the first video, but come autumn, that is the start, and we will publish not more than 10 or so videos per year, one reflecting the summer workshop, the others reflecting special issues that are published, and then other items can come from the book and media review team, and can come from authors publishing in the journal. And these are short 3 minutes sort of statements that provide quick insight and hopefully gather some curiosity to look further into the journal. So that's what I wanted to share with you. So I stop that screen now, and thank you for the attention.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you to all of us, of you. So far, we have 4 questions. First one is, what are the main reasons for a desk reject for you? And can you elaborate on that? Another question is, what is the exact role of the cover letter? How long must it be? What important points in it? Can you also say a few words of the transition to open access? And the first question is a question about novel innovations for organizational behavior, such as gamification, and is it a topic that can be interesting for your journal? So I don't know who wants to begin to answer these different questions.
Maybe Marlys, who's been silent for the longest. So.
Sure. Do you want me to just like to ask you around with each question, or just go through the list, each of us?
As you
matter? Okay, so desk reject, I realized I didn't publish statistics for AMD when I saw the other journal editors did. So we have about just under 10% acceptance rate for ours, and we have a similar desk reject rate to many of the other journals. Ours is about 50 to 60%. When you submit your article to AMD, there's 2 stages. One of them is the managing editor of AMD, Mike Malground, will look at the paper. If there's significant formatting issues or something else happens, like high plagiarism content or something, it would get flagged at that stage. That's not very many papers that Mike sends back to authors for for them to look at. Most of the desk rejects, when it gets from Mike to Kevin Rotman, our editor-in-chief, he reads through all of the papers that are submitted to the journal. Reasons for desk reject would be similar to many of the other editors. We still get papers that have very clear hypotheses that are being tested, even though very explicitly that's not what the journal does. So it's either the paper is not a fit for the journal, either it doesn't study organizations, it's not about empirical exploration, it's doing something different, or the other thing is sometimes papers are just really not sort of strong enough to be entered in the review process, and then Kevin usually provides additional information and sort of a desk edit rather than just a desk reject, so that the authors can address whatever issues he's identified and resubmit the paper. So that's how we do, that's reasons for desk reject at AMD. I think it might be more helpful for people to hear what happens at other journals sort of across the topic. So I'll stop there. I'll just say while people are talking, also for open access, we have some resources online. So I'll just pop those in the chat while other editors are talking about the desk reject policy at their journals.
Thank you, Marlys. Who wants to add something?
I would like to respond to a couple of questions, please. First of all, regarding the cover letter, I absolutely agree with Michael Morley about the criticality of the cover letter. It becomes especially critical if the novelty and added value of the paper is not properly elucidated in the paper itself. So at least this is the second chance of the authors maybe to help the editor, the handling editor and associate editor still to better grasp what is here novel, what is the added value of this particular study. Of course, when a paper, for example, if I am receiving a paper on a topic that I am expert myself, like mergers and acquisitions, agility, ambidexterity, it's much easier for me to understand and to identify whether it deals with some novel aspects. But if it is a completely different topic, then especially the cover letter helps. It is very important also to explain in the cover letter how you are joining the ongoing debate in a target journal. Of course, we are against coercive citation, any journal, I believe. However, completely ignoring all the papers published so far in the target journal also sends a very bad signal, because it says that whether you are not updated or you just don't care as a submitting author. And obviously, this sends a very problematic signal. Regarding the questions about the gamifications and so on in the domain of organizational behavior. I would refer to it in a broader sense, because gamification, maybe it's part of digitalization, artificial intelligence applications, and so on. Some authors believe wrongly that if you are submitting a paper on a trendy topic, by default, it has higher chances. But I would like to emphasize that this is a very wrong approach. It's not enough. Of course, digitization is a topic that is rising in importance. It attracts a lot of attention in the leading journals, but it's very important, once again, to highlight what are the enablers, precursors of digitization adoption in the organization? What are potential outcomes? Moreover, if we are looking at the reports produced by leading management consultancy companies like Boston Consulting Group, Ernst & Young, and so on, they have serious doubts about the much trumpeted benefits of digitization in the organizations. Yes, there are also costs, not overly emphasized benefits, but also a lot of costs incurred because of digitization. So it's not a rosy picture, I would say. And very important to put these things into the right perspective. Another topics, because I see here the question that is focused around the OB, organizational behavior. The question is, what other interesting topics might be of interest for the journal? For example, I would like to give another example, the topic of absenteeism and presenteeism. So far, most of the empirical papers that focused on presenteeism as an issue focused on the outcomes of presenteeism. But what leads to the presenteeism formation? What are the enablers, antecedents of presenteeism? If you can capture in the same model the enablers and outcomes of presenteeism, and also incorporate and explore moderators that are very unique, such a paper, for example, would be of interest for us. just as an example, but of course, this is just one particular example. Thank you.
Thank you. Daniel, Michael?
So I'll just make a few comments on the first question, if I could, and that relates to the business of papers not entering the review process and or being rejected at the desk or whatever. And you know, it's no editor, you know, simply wants to sit behind a desk rejecting papers. Quite the opposite. I mean, you know, our role is to try and really find, you know, good, interesting, novel pieces of scholarship that we believe fit with the outlet and that are going to attract an audience. And certainly in my experience over the last number of years, I think there are three particular reasons that come to mind. Many of them will be obvious to most people here, I think. The first issue for me is the author has simply submitted the paper too early. And that speaks to the issue of perhaps, you know, not having sat in the reader's chair, perhaps not having engaged in a more friendly review process in advance. Now, in that instance, in European Management Review, we very much try, a little bit like what was mentioned about discoveries, what we try and do is we try and reject the paper at this juncture because we genuinely believe it's not going to make it through the review process. But because we think there's an interest or a novelty in it, we will often invite a resubmission as a new submission in due course. And that might come back to the journal as a brand new submission. When it comes back, it is treated as a first time submission. And in that instance, I think authors are given the opportunity to reassess where their paper is at and to increase the chances of the paper getting a more favorable review round subsequently. A second reason for rejection is clearly about fit. I have a particular paper in mind, which I won't mention, but it was an excellent paper. And it really, I found it difficult to say no at the European Management Review desk, but I felt I would be doing the authors a disservice and the scholarship they were offering a disservice by trying to shoehorn the paper into European Management Review. So regrettably, I wrote to the author saying, look, this is a question of fit. It is an excellent piece of scholarship, but I think your paper will command a much bigger readership, a much better audience in a more specialist journal. And that happens quite a bit, I think. So the issue of fit is very, very important. And finally, and I know this can be a frustration for authors, but the issue of contribution, it is critical for a paper making it through the review process. And even in situations where we make a more marginal decision there, because we think there's some novelty or some interest in the paper, reviewers will pick up on it. So the question of how the paper pushes an idea forward, how it makes an advance relative to what we know, this, I think, is absolutely essential also, and occurs very commonly as a reason for why papers either get desk rejected or don't make it through the system early on. Just one last issue on the business of open access, which I know is becoming such a huge debate. And as the contributor says, you know, all journals are looking at this now, all publishers are looking at it. And actually, based on certainly what I've been reading and looking at, management journals are behind the curve here. Other fields have a much higher incidence of open access scholarship now than do business and management journals. So we are behind the curve, and whether we like it or not, this is moving apace. I think that the big challenge is the article processing charge that a journal will charge if you want your paper published in the journal open access, but that journal is not yet open access. The beauty of some of the national agreements that are being signed, which I have to say I'm in favor of, at least those agreements mean that scholars will automatically have their work accessed and as openly as possible. I realize there is a lot to run in this debate yet, but I do think management journals are behind the curve here, and I think this is something that we really are going to have to deal with in the time ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Daniel, some
Yes.
comments? And there is a new question in the chat.
There is a new question in the chat.
If a paper is delayed too much by the editors before being sent to reviewers, is it appropriate to contact the editors?
Certainly, it's not a problem. You know the editor anyway, so there can be reasons for this, and if you have them explained to you, that might help. So I think that's okay. We reject more or less on the same basis as the others. We sometimes have a confusion perhaps around it can be a paper on HRM or on leadership or just management strategy. But for us, if there is no implication for organizational theory and organizational research, that would be problematic to publish, of course. But most of the desk rejections are based on fit with the aims and scope. There are some that are very simply badly written and prematurely submitted. So what Michael said about having sort of a local seminar culture or so, where you have actually presented your papers before and been able to develop them, often that shows. So you have a paper that is mature, so to speak, and ready for submissions. And the cover letter helps there. I mean, basically the cover letter saves the editor time. It gives them a good sense of what the authors have wanted with the paper. Never more than half a page, if I put it like that, a cover letter. So don't include any references or anything like that, but give a bit the story, what you want to do with the paper, and how you see it fit with what goes on in the journal. So it is, of course, all too often the case that we receive papers on a topic where there has been a special issue in the journal a few years ago, or there has been a debate in the journal a couple of years ago, and that has just passed the authors. They are apparently unaware of that, and that's frustrating, because you submit and people work for you quite a lot, and so you should at least have worked a bit for the journal in that sense of learning the journal before you submit to it. What has been published on my topic in this journal before? And as I said earlier, that might be something you think is rubbish, but then you have to show you're aware of this rubbish and articulate and what the rubbish comes from, and where is the rubbishness in this, and so on and so forth. So that kind of awareness is crucial. Gamification, yes, I think that's an interesting topic, and I posted in the chat to Janine, who just asked about this, that people related to the journal have just published a book on organizational gamification, and it is an interesting discussion in relationship to new forms of organizing work, of course, and what organizations are becoming, maybe partly due to post-pandemic era of work, and not only digitalization, but sort of compartmentalization of work, that we are individuals in home offices now, and people will choose to stay there after the pandemic and so on. So, but we also find in startups, those of us who study those, that the forms of working is quite radically different as it emerges presently. So what organized work will become is tied into the phenomenon of gamification in many ways and on different levels. So I think that's interesting for that reason, but also the element of play in work, which is another aspect of gamification in organizations. And it's, of course, an old sort of dichotomy almost between playing and working, and that has collapsed in many ways, at least in some parts of what we call the unicorns or startups in exactly game industry and filming and various digital platform services, how they have developed and become solid companies. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. Marlys, Michael, and Shlomo, you confirm that the cover letter is a half page, a short piece of, and focusing on the on what has been published in the journal on the topics.
Yeah.
Well, sorry, regarding the size, the length of the cover letter, it can be maybe 1 page or maximum 2 pages, but obviously no need to exaggerate, not to make it a paper in itself. However, and here I would like to talk briefly about the point-to-point response. Here you don't have actually any limitations, and this is a great opportunity for the submitting authors who receive the opportunity to revise and resubmit their paper. Here they have the golden opportunity to convince reviewers, because there are no limitations in terms of length of the point-to-point response. Also, I responded in the chat to the question of Ralitza regarding the delays and so on. So obviously now everyone is struggling during the COVID-19. So therefore, I would ask everyone to be patient. But in normal times, of course, the delay by 1 month or more, I think this is a bit exaggerated. Thank you.
I'd like to just add to the conversation that we're having about the cover letter. So one of the most consequential things that an editor does when they have a paper that they're handling is actually figure out who the reviewer should be and try to convince. You're trying to, as other editors have mentioned, like we're really trying hard to find and develop and accept fantastic papers. That's our entire job. So one thing that authors can do to help the reviewers, especially as people have mentioned, if I handle lots of papers which are not my personal area of research, but I'm familiar with the kind of research in terms of methods or those kinds of things. It really helps to give some indication in the letter, sort of what conversation you're part of. So I look at the cover letter and I actually very carefully read through the framing, the front part positioning of the paper, and the reference section to see like what scholars is your working conversation with, and are they also people who are familiar with AMD. So we try and, because it's a particular kind of journal, I need to find people who both understand AMD and understand your work. So your cover letter can provide very important clues for some of the, who you are in conversation with. It's also very important if you've had friendly reviews from other scholars, which would exclude them from actually being a reviewer. Someone's already provided quite a lot of feedback. If you include that in the cover letter, that's helpful, because it's a bit frustrating to spend a lot of time trying to think who would be the best reviewer and send them a note and then get something back saying, well, I'm sorry, I've already, I have either a conflict or I've already provided a lot of feedback, so I can't be a reviewer here. So that's another thing to include in the cover letter is, if there's someone who's provided other feedback and might not be the best choice for a reviewer, just let us know, because we're trying our very best to find great reviewers for your paper.
Yeah, if I might just add, Hervé, just two very quick comments, seeing as I raised the issue. I mean, I think it's important because, it provides the window that the author wants us to look through of their work. And I think that's important because what I find really fascinating is how people's work gets read retrospectively. And in many instances, people's papers get read differently than they originally anticipated. And I find that a very interesting idea, how scholarship unfolds in a community very differently to how it is the authors perhaps originally thought about and intended their work to be positioned. So I think the cover letter is an opportunity for the author to position their work through their lens, through their eyes. Obviously, as the colleagues have said, one has to be clear about the claims that one makes about where the contribution lies in the work in the letter and so on. But I think it is signal sending. And I think it is very helpful at the desk because quite rightly, you know, as Marl says, it really helps us to see who would be an appropriate member of the review team, which direction in which the paper might go, etc. So for those reasons, I think it's an opportunity, and it's also good writing practice. I think it's, you know, it forces all of us as authors to say, well, what are we saying here? You know, where does our contribution lie, and who do we want to connect with? Who do we see as the audience? And perhaps who has already been exposed to the work, if it's been previously presented at a conference, or it's been friendly reviewed in the home institution and so on. It's an opportunity to signal send. It's an opportunity to create the window through which you want the editor and indeed the audience to look.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other question to our guests? I don't see any question more. Okay, so I will again thank you, all of you, for your presentations. There will be a session on this special issue of the European Management Review on Rationality right now, I think. Do you confirm, Louisa?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. No, fine. Okay. So thank you, everybody, and have a good conference.
Thank you. Thank you, Hervé, for organizing or chairing. Yeah.
Bye.
Thanks so much, colleagues. Thanks very much. Have a good day.
Yay.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay. Thank you. And of course, I invite anyone who might be interested in the in this project, a special issue of the European Management Review, to remain with us. That's linked to the meet with editor, because part of the reason of the initiative is that I shall become editor-in-chief in the future next year. So it's an initial contribution to the future of the review. Okay, and may I just share just the first slide, the screen. It's okay. This is what appear also in the link that I copied here, and it's already published in EMR, and thanks to Michael for hosting this call. So I just introducing me in 5 minutes. So why the topic? Why us? What the function of this initiative? Well, I think that I should. Starting with our life these days is the best way to start. So I think the COVID crisis and has been the most prominent example of how badly we need models for decision making that are not the one that we have in the repertoire. And I think that the management organization, engineer, I mean, in the broad sense, design-oriented, policy, problem-solving oriented community should be in a good position for contributing and providing these tools. Which tools? Well, I think the main problem is that as I see it, the field of decision making is still divided very much between the behavioral tradition that is very much concerned with realism and description and how people behave and all the possible mistakes, and reinforced by the heuristic and bias tradition. And on the other side, we left strong methods, rational even methods, to to say it bluntly, perhaps to economists or to a repertory that is not fit to condition of radical uncertainty. I would add even not only the methods for deciding wisely in the unknown. This is what the COVID asked us to do, and apparently the rationality, in the sense of logical soundness, strength of reasoning, even at the level of the central decision makers, legislator, politician, government, has not been particularly compelling. So in addition, I would also, and in fact in the questions that are in the call for paper, we might add also risk, but risk, well, now it's the centennial of Knight book on those issues, but risk in the sense, especially downside risk as manager conceive risk, which is not just variability, but exposure to heavy negative potential consequences. Okay, there are many, I think, so there is a whole, a practical whole, reality gap, and let's say an empirical gap. This whole is also a theoretical gap. It's a theoretical whole. As I say, because the field is still strongly divided on this ground of methods that are sound, strong, wise, but fit to highly uncertain condition or risky risk of important negative consequences. We are not really doing that well. Well, there are some other fields. Well, before going to the other field, I think some of us, and here I come with the why us, some of us have been already involved. Well, all of us are working, thinking in this direction. Some of us, notably the two of us who are present here, myself, Armand, and Nikolai, has been already working in the past on a special issue in 2001 on developing that Simon legacy. That was an issue in memory of Herbert Simon, in the direction in which this legacy has not been developed, which I think is very much this one. So the Simon legacy have been more developed in the behavioral direction, even in weaker form of rationality rather than in this direction. So we did already took already some step in the past. I think that now they should be really useful, not just for us or for theory, but also for the world and for Europe. But I would say Europe is, I see some sign in Europe, in the decision making in the crisis, in the COVID crisis, there has been open use of logic, like the precautionary principle. They are Ursula von der Leyen have been talking about strategic foresight and how to, but what are the tools? What we can contribute is to clarify what these logic are and contribute greatly to expanding this tool. For example, what is what is in the precautionary principle is a nightmare. You know, is it enough? It involves threshold of acceptable risk. When it leads to paralysis, is it a good heuristic? So I think it's also very practically relevant. In the management field, I come to the third point before leaving the floor to the colleagues. You know, I think there is a flourishing of unconnected effort that actually could be very useful in becoming new model, some visible new model for heuristic of sound decision making for high uncertainty. And I mean, of course, strategy, because it always had the problem of important decision, high uncertainty. What's the logic precisely? Entrepreneurship, where judgment and but what's behind some judgment rather than wrong judgment. Design, and here, so most design methods have measuring themselves with this issue since a long time, but also some other fields like, so I just, we invited in the call for paper eventually some structural hole bridging for innovation using the language by our friend Ron Barth. So how to, there are methods that are very interesting: protection from natural hazard, medicine, engineering, some in economics, mostly in epistemology. You know that that should be perhaps brought in to renew what are the underpinning of our models of decision making. So we are open, and I think there is need for work that propose conceptual development of classic notions, as I say, to perhaps transfer and application from other fields, definition of what we mean at all, and how can we measure sound decision making in condition where we cannot really assess it by outcomes because they are so far. That would be, and so there has been more paper recently, less on these methods and more on the source of uncertainty. So unknowns, black swan, epistemic uncertainty. What are these radical uncertainty conditions? So some clarification are welcome also here, but the emphasis is especially on method for responding to those conditions. I'm just pointing out that there are these conditions. Okay, and Nikolai and Armand will certainly can certainly have a view or can give their view on what is going on in these various fields or what they're viewing on the whole enterprise. So please.
Should I go first, Anna?
Thank you.
Okay. So here's my take on the special issue, and I guess I approach the themes of the special issue as a strategy scholar. I guess I'm the strategy scholar in the team, and a number of you are probably interested in both strategy issues, and we just heard, in fact, from Michael Morley that strategy is one of the 4 key clusters of papers that get published in the EURAM. It goes without saying that the themes of the special issue are of general relevance to management research and practice, but perhaps, as Anna already also indicated, perhaps they are in fact of particular relevance to strategy broadly conceived. So what is strategy? Well, from my basic perspective, it is about assembling resources in order to earn a future rent stream. And it would therefore seem to be about using creative thought processes to imagine futures and the firm's role in those futures. Perhaps even if you're sufficiently big, sufficiently powerful, it's also about creating those futures or parts of them. And of course, all this takes place under the impact of uncertainty of the kind that we wish to highlight in this special issue. Now, as Anna also indicated, a lot of strategy research uses the tools of economics. In fact, particularly competitive equilibrium theory and the theory of rational expectations. Much of our core theory in strategy does this, although often implicitly. The resource-based view, which is still strategy's dominant perspective, pretty much explicitly does this. Even scholars who work from a behavioral perspective make use of these basic economics tools, typically as a sort of counterfactual point of departure, against which one can understand, say, behavioral market failure, to use a term coined by Giovanni Garbetti. So this is about how bounded rationality creates failures, market failures, and therefore creates opportunities for strategizing firms. The problem is that these tools, and therefore much of the core of strategy thinking, deny how I just characterize strategy, namely as using creative thought processes to imagine futures and the firm's role in those futures, and collect, buy, assemble resources in order to be able to address those futures. Why? Well, because these tools assume given state spaces, if we're talking economics, or given landscapes, if we're talking about behavioral models, which means that there really isn't any real room for creativity, it seems, because the state space is there, or the landscape is there. This may sound philosophical, but I think it's very common sense and very, very practical. So let me try to give you an example of the kind of decision situations that I think we need to think much more about in strategy in the context of the themes of this special issue. So think about the current structural changes of the global car industry, which have been set in motion by the emergence or the advent of electricity-powered cars. Of course, these changes will give rise to all sorts of changes as some firms enter, other firms exit, new and existing players scramble to define their positions in the new competitive landscape. And a lot of this is still just totally unforeseen by everyone, including the current players in the industry. But they still need to form expectations, for example, about things like future resource uses, future resource prices. What will batteries cost 5 years down the road? Product prices, and so on. Which means that players in the car industry globally are dealing, in a sense, with a state space which they're defining. It's being defined by their actions. And how can they do this? And are there rational pieces of advice that we can offer to guide making representations that will guide behaviors in this emerging industrial landscape? For example, how much of the representations producers like, let's say, Audi or Volkswagen made use of before the advent of Tesla, how much of that can be carried beyond this major structural break and still be used? So in other words, this is really about the epistemics of decision making. How do players decide on what beliefs about the car industry and about competition, resource scarcities, resource prices, product prices, and so on, which beliefs to maintain, which to drop, what are the new beliefs that we need to form, how should we form them, what are the rational grounds for forming them, and so on and so forth. And it seems, and I very much hinted at this, that we don't really have strong, established, rational ways of talking about these issues, but we need them. And we need them as scholars, researchers, and of course the practitioners need them. And that's why we need this special issue. And I'll stop here.
Thanks a lot, Nikolai. Armand.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Anna, for taking this initiative, and I agree on all what you have said, and Nikolai perspective also is, I think, very important in the discussion. A short history may be useful. These topics, Anna and I have white hair. She doesn't have that. But
well, there is some
we're always young. But we remember, you remember that a moment which was very important in 2001, 2002, because there was the possibility to rediscuss the Simon legacy, and I think this is the first important discussion that maybe we have. And we had this intuition of that there was different types of rationality, including exactly what Nikolai was mentioning, creative rationality, expandable rationality, to use terms that we used at that time. But it is true that it was not easy to formulate that in the management, let's classic frameworks, which were, and I totally share Nikolai's view, we even implicitly were built into what can be called the Savagian, Waldian model of decision into uncertainty. And there was few alternatives. I cannot say that there is today a complete alternative well designed, otherwise the special issue would not exist. But I think that we are at the threshold of joining several efforts that make bricks. In my team, we made a kind of detour. We went into other fields like design theory, creativity thinking, to elaborate on that. But we know also, and von Krogh could have said, that in the field of project management, they have been also rediscussing unknowns. And last but not least, I think that we have today in political theory also a new perspective that reopens the idea of options, for instance. What are options? And finally, there is a kind of, I should say, and this is also to attract any important thought in mind, there is a kind of tyranny of what, well, maybe not everybody is used to that, of Bayesian thinking. Bayesian thinking means the standard framework of probability theory. Even if you are not a probabilist, in a way you think like that. So all these elements, from my perspective, we could make a real breakthrough by joining these efforts in this special issue, by bringing all these small rivers, and we cannot kill the future. So let's see the rivers coming, and this special issue, I think, could help to make something that I think is crucial to management. And again, it's not only the standard management issues. We are all familiar of the Weberian distinction between responsibility and éthique de conviction, éthique de responsabilité. So ethics of conviction, ethics of responsibility. And just to give you something important, the COVID situation, and I was invited to Le Monde to write a chronicle on that, saying that finally the Weberian distinction was not sufficient to describe what we have all been witnessing. Strategists, the politicians, and the doctors, all the specialists, all the models of epidemiology, infectiology, virology that came in. And the Weberian model was there totally not enough. And well, they have struggled as they could. So I think if this special issue helps one to rediscuss all these topics to make them more compact, to lower the tyranny of classic decision making processes, and to open to new political theory in the unknown or in the creative processes. Well, frankly, this is not something that is in, I am involved in several journals, and well, even in management of innovation, it's still not exactly done. So this is very ambitious, but why not? Why not?
Thank you so much. You really expressed the spirit in the best possible way. It sounds clearer and more, challenging and attractive even to me. I mean, so, and thank you for mentioning also Georg. Of course, von Krogh is not here for logistic problems, but he definitely will sustain and bring the river of that come from project management, project design, and technological issues that are, of course, important. Yes, who is talking?
Maybe we have questions from the audience.
Okay, so now let's open for we have a further 10 minutes. Any question or even suggestions? Xavier.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you so much. I find it very, very interesting, this call for us, this special issue. I apologize if you hear at some point the laundry machine's noise. I have two reflections listening to you. One deals with effective decision making, and the other with uncertainty. And so I find it, as Armand was saying, I think it's indeed very ambitious, but why not? Because when we talk about effective, right, how do we know that new models of decision making will be effective? We will need to test them. And I'm reminded here of a quite provocative article that Phil Bromley and Devaki Rao published in SMJ in 2014, calling for a practice-based view of strategy, really very different from what the strategy as practice folks have been advocated, which is actually testing management practices, tools, or techniques effectiveness. So I find it that it could actually be brought into that, let's say, incipient stream. I don't know if it has really catch up, but I think some people are also with the experimental design work trying to do that to some extent. What I see is that there's a lot of emphasis these days, as Nikolai was referring to, from folks which label themselves as behavioral strategy, which is of course a contested term. But some of them, as we were discussing in a prior session a while ago today in the strategic management SIG, is that there is now a lot of traction for simple rules or simplification, heuristics, as something that would be good. Whereas 40 years ago, when it was first introduced into strategy literature by Schwenk or Stubart, it was seen as something that was dangerous. And I think that the issue that is being raised actually is the heterogeneity of individuals and actually being able to unbias or debias themselves, which to me speaks to Jim March organizational intelligence that might not be symmetrically or evenly distributed across organizations. So I really see here also an opportunity to link it to the behavioral theory of the firm and to Jim March's work on organizational intelligence. The other thing that I wanted to raise is maybe a bit provocative, is while I fully agree with Nikolai about how to deal with uncertainty, with the part which is unpredictable, like Knightian part that cannot be quantified, and hence called risk. And there's this special issue that in AMR, which came up recently. You know, Nelson and Winter already in '82 tried to call for a revolution, right, with their book, and to get us out of an equilibrium framework of thinking. And obviously, 40 years later, we should probably say that we have not managed to, I think, but you know better. But what do we need to do? Because I think that the power of economics and our economy as friends is again increasing in the field of management and strategy. And I don't see precisely a deviation from that equilibrium thinking. That's my reflections from your presentation. Thank you.
Very good comments, Xavier. If I may respond, two points. If you mentioned Nielsen and Winder. If you look at the models in their book, those models are actually equilibrium models, and they have a probabilistic approach to decision making. So firms, just draw technology from a distribution. So even Nielsen and Winder perhaps had to resort in 1982 to use the standard tools of economics. But I would actually say that economists are becoming aware of the importance of dealing with these issues. So we do see work on fundamental uncertainty and ignorance and so on. And that's very encouraging, I think. So in other words, I'm not sure we should make this special issue an econ bashing special issue.
One comment is that there is today a large literature on the rationality of the creative process, and that gives very important hints. But the problem is that you have to put in the departure point that you are in an unknown field. You have to write it. Mathematically, it's possible, but it's not standard probability theory. If people are interested in those direction, maybe we can have a kind of discussion with them. For instance, just a clue, indecidability theory is key, because precisely when you are in the unknown, takes the COVID, we know we are in the unknown, no discussion. Nobody knows how mutations will go. So it's not a debate. And no manager can say, well, let's get rid of that. It's the basic point. So this doesn't mean necessarily complex thinking, but what's true is that you have to go to fields that we're not familiar. If I speak about mathematical intuitionism, many people think it's a kind of imaginary fancy thing. No, it's extremely rigorous. It's one of the most important things in the maths of the 20th century. It's very important. Brouwer is a mathematician that called about the creative thinker. So I think that there are, we leave the possibility, and Anna, you agree, to have people bringing new type of models, which are not, again, we are not under the tyranny of von Neumann game theory, which is now, mathematically speaking, it's one of my fields, really no more under the edge. It's really old math.
In fact, I would link and react perhaps to Xavier by saying we really, I would see the enterprise successful if we really manage not to refer always to the same traditions. Okay, we want to, and so let me, I am tempted to start with, to give you two anecdotes of my relation, and that's why I have my gray in my head and not entirely, with Simon and March at the very beginning, because as Jim Marseille kindly, I am one of the birds out of the Carnegie nest. Even so, I was not really born there. I elected this as my nest, but in any case, And I think that with March, we always had this discussion on whether to develop Simon in one direction or the other direction. And of course, the anecdote that he gave me when I was visiting Stanford, donate me a book of poetry, so you know that he wrote poetry. And then he said, "Oh, did you like this poetry? It was called Footstep or something like that." And I said, "Oh yes, because it is an hymn to inappropriateness." So the entire book was against routine, all for creativity, against the logic of appropriateness. So against was, and he was laughing and basically agreeing that he has this two sides. So he really wanted people to play and go beyond, and we should not be stuck with or even with the routines and this kind of thing. In addition, what we want, as we said, is rational imagination. Okay, so it's the other road. So basically now all this fashion about the simple routine, and the more simple and the more and the less and the more naive and the more blind and the more automatic they are, the better. I think is not really is what we, yeah, it's something useful, but we want to do something else. Okay, these are not the kind of I had a debate with Giovanni Dozzi, Riccardo Viale, this, for example, the Gigerenzer group. Okay, so if you say we should decide between two vaccines or even two university professors by saying if you recognize the queue, then accept the candidate. I mean, no one would be happy with this kind of rationality. So I think we should really go beyond that. And yeah, the other anecdote is that, no, I don't think the other anecdote, too much time. There, Armand, you had
now
your hand?
No, I said now it's the work of the people that are going to send papers.
Yeah,
No,
of course.
But
no, I mean, yeah.
If people want more cues or hints, I think, Anna, we can agree that they can write to us and we can have a kind of dialogue before they send the papers, or I don't know, kind of open discussion.
Yes, it's always the case. I mean, the submission made the journal to a good extent. So we can call. We think there is relevant work, of course, going in this direction. Otherwise, we would not have made the call. But of course, the real direction will be made by the submitter. So may I just say the second anecdote that Hervé Simon actually also had this tension and with Jim March and had this sort of sense that and agreed with the judgment, because I sort of asked him permission, you know. I said, what do you think about going in the other direction? And that's where I got also some courage, you know. I think he would agree that this direction is to be developed. Not going to be simpler, but perhaps as complex as we need. Maybe the method for deciding on a very complicated issue is not very simple. That's it. Okay. I think it's
Anna, can I just make one comment, Anna? I was fascinated by what Armand said about detours and taking detours for a period. And you know, the philosophers always said that taking detours is necessary so we get to the truth. So they're never lost. Those detours come to play in a special issue that tries to break out of mindsets and create something very, very different, huh? Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, I think we have, with this blessing by our editor-in-chief, I think we can be happy, close happily this session. And of course, we are open to now. The submission will be open in September, right? So from September on. But we are there. We could receive questions or you know, our mail are there in the call. So exploratory, yeah, question. Yes, whatever. Thank you so much for having been here.
Thank you very much to all. Bye. Good conference.
And thank you again to Armand and Nikolai for joining. Oh, there is a hand. Oh no, it's a hello, Sunil. Hello. Hello.
Bye bye.
Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.